In spite of the ushering in of a Republican democratic India in 1950, it is not that post-independent India witnessed a declining trend of caste identity. In fact, Professor Andre Betai, a noted sociologist, pointed out that outside family, the relation between caste and politics has become much more transparent during this period. The same kinds of words we come to know from Professor Dipankar Gupta, who also pointed out that caste as a system has declined in post-independent India, but caste as an identity has become much more transparent, and it is not that caste and as an identity has been erased. Let us look at this particular matter, that is the relation between caste and politics in the post-independent India, in a detailed manner. We have noted that the basic thrust of the Indian Constitution was to create an egalitarian democratic society. For that purpose, it has created certain provisions for the scheduled castes. Notwithstanding that, we have, however, noticed that from 1950 till 1977, there was a kind of one-party dominance as described by W.H. Morris Jones in India. Although cracks to the Indian National Congress could be noticed since the days of the late 60s, when some of the states of India voted non-Congress parties into power, still, overall, we may say that the Congress was in an overwhelming dominant position during 1950 to 1977. If we look at the dynamics of caste, we find that at that time also, the castes, the major political situation was that the prominent castes or the upper castes sided with the Congress, and even the scheduled castes and the other backward castes were not in a position to pronounce their identity in a very detailed manner, and so it could be surmised that their support was also towards the Indian National Congress. But since 1977, some major changes appeared in this field. Although we should mention Dr. B.R. Ambedkar founded the Republican Party, whose major aim was to mobilize the scheduled castes and to get some concessions from the Indian government for their economic upliftment. Thereafter, Dr. Ambedkar, however, totally renounced the caste system and embraced Buddhism and asked his followers to do that. But still, Republican Party was a major creation during this period for the scheduled castes, for their mobilization, for their upliftment. Since 1977, some different kinds of equations could be noticed so far as caste and politics is concerned. One major aspect is the rise of the middle peasants, particularly in North India and in UP and Bihar. We know that some changes were deliberately created by the Indian state, again in order to bring in an egalitarian society. One major kind of intervention was the existence of a centralized administration with scope for people belonging to the scheduled castes to be accepted as members of that administration but through the policy of reservation. So this centralized administration was created by the Indian state to establish a kind of political system where at least some kind of equality could be noticed. The second major thing was the kind of industrialization that the Indian state initiated. With industrialization, with modernization, with urbanization, and with the penetration of, although limited at that time, of market economy, people from the so-called lower castes also began to get accepted into this new kind of a system. The third major aspect was the Green Revolution. We all know that major agrarian policies were introduced by the Indian government with some scientific and agricultural incentives that ushered in a green revolution, that is an agricultural boom, particularly in North India, in Punjab, Haryana, in UP. This created a very large section of peasants who, although did not have that much of land in their possession, but by virtue of being agriculturalists, they could wield a kind of power during that period. So this was another important aspect during this phase. And finally, another change that was initiated by the Indian system was the abolition of the zamindari system. Now, this abolition created a kind of people who could not hold land beyond a particular ceiling. So, the earlier zamindari class, which controlled both economic resources as well as political resources, came down to a very limited number, and they were deprived of their land and as well as their political hold. So these changes created a middle peasant category, particularly in northern India, who became economically resourceful, and by virtue of that, they tried to wield their power in the political scenario too. In 1981, on the occasion of the death anniversary of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Kasiram formed a party which later became the Bahujan Samaj Party in 1984. Now, the arrival of this particular party disturbed the traditional political caste equation in North India. Along with it, the Yadavs became prominent both in UP and in Bihar. And with the rise of the Yadavs in these two states, leaders arose, and leaders like Mulayam Singh Yadav and Lalu Prasad Yadav, they also began to wield political power, which was not seen during the early phase of post-independent India. Now, while describing these features, one should keep in mind that the creation of these parties and their political manipulations did not presume that a particular caste, the members of a particular caste, all vote for one particular party, or all the backward castes or all the scheduled castes voted for one particular party. We have to keep in mind that there have been enormous divisions within a particular caste and also amongst different backward castes. So there was both intra-caste and inter-caste divisions. But it is true that from 1977, there emerged the second phase of Indian politics so far as caste is concerned. Although the Republican Party was formed prior to that phase, but from 77 till 89, we can say that this is the second phase. Why we are considering 77 as the starting point and 89 as the end point of this particular phase? Because in 1977, we all know that the first non-Congress government at the union level in India was formed. At that formation, Charan Singh had a major say, whose party from UP also belonged to the middle peasant category, who became very powerful during that time, following the features that were initiated by the Indian state during the first phase, and it continued till 1989, and 1989 to me appears to the end point of this particular phase, because at that time another classificatory variable within caste emerged, and that was the other backward castes, or what we call OBCs. Now, regarding OBCs, we have to mention certain things. When the constitution was adopted, the makers of the constitution were of the opinion that apart from the scheduled castes, there were also some other castes who required some kind of protective intervention by the state. They were not at par with the scheduled castes because, like the scheduled castes, they did not experience the kind of social humiliation, social atrocities, but at the same time, unlike the upper castes, they were deprived of many resources. So they were like a kind of middle castes between the upper castes and the scheduled castes. So unlike the scheduled castes, they did not experience that kind of humiliation. And again, unlike the upper castes, they were not at the receiving end of so much of resources. But the constitution at that time did not make special provisions for them. In 1979, the BP Mandal Commission came out with certain suggestions for the other backward castes and identified more than 3,000 castes as belonging to that category. The recommendations were, however, not implemented during that time. It was in 1989 when VP Singh was the Prime Minister of India that talks were going on regarding implementation of the recommendations of the Mandal Commission, and it ultimately came out that in 1990 the recommendations were implemented. This created a nationwide furor. Many youths, in fact, committed suicide against these recommendations. Actually, they were scared of this kind of policies, and they were skeptical about whether these kinds of reservations were really beneficial for those who actually needed them. Apart from this kind of furor, there were some sociologists. They were also criticizing the recommendations of the Mandal Commission. Here also we must mention the names of Andre Betai and Dipankar Gupta, who pointed out that the kind of recommendations that the Mandal Commission suggested are not consistent with the Indian social system, primarily for two reasons. First was the criteria that were created by the Mandal Commission for determining backwardness are not consistent with the real identification of backwardness. The criteria like whether the women of a particular caste go outside their homes and take jobs, this is a kind of criterion which does not exist in many castes. This is related to the issue of gender. So, this criterion is not conducing to a proper identification of backward caste. So, this was a first reason. And the second reason was that apart from the 12% or around 12% of upper castes and the 15% of the tribal population and the 22% of the scheduled caste population, the rest belong to this category. So, if someone really wants to give some suggestions and recommendations for the other backward castes, all the remaining population in fact belong to this category, which is not getting clear from the suggestions of the B.P. Mandal Commission. So this created an academic debate on the one hand and a kind of political debate on the other. So the Mandal Commission recommendations created a new kind of caste dynamics in Indian politics. That is why from 89 onwards, the third phase of the dynamics of caste and politics began, and during this phase, we come across several kind of conjunctions, correlations, interrelations between not only caste and politics, but caste, gender, class on the one hand and politics on the other. Coming to the third phase, or rather the phase which I believe is still continuing, we have to keep in mind that the evolution of the caste dynamics in India is not uniform. There have been different kind of caste dynamics in some states of northern India, in some states of southern India, while West Bengal, Assam, Kerala, they provide a different kind of caste dynamics. So the third phase, in fact, provides us a very challenging task to find out the relationship between caste and politics. While on the one hand, we find a kind of middle caste, middle peasant dominance in northern India, a not so prominent caste identity in northeastern part of India, a not so prominent upper caste dominance and anti-caste, upper caste movements in some parts of western India, but a very prominent anti-upper caste movement and identity in southern India. This is the phase of affirmative identity politics, where the ritualistic features of the caste system are gradually, slowly, but steadily dying down, but the identity aspect of the caste politics likewise slowly and gradually coming up. So it is becoming a very interesting aspect of Indian politics. Now, if we discuss caste and politics, one aspect needs to be addressed separately, and thus that aspect is the kind of politics that goes on with the policy of reservation. Reservation, the time of adoption of the constitution, was thought to be a 10-year policy, that it was argued at the Constituent Assembly that after 10 years we will not have to address this issue, because the policy of reservation will be able to penetrate into the farthest corner of the caste system, and there will be no need of reservation after 10 years. But it has been found that the reservation policies and the issues remained almost unheard of even by the members who really deserved them even after the expiry of the 10 years. That is why the reservation policy continued. It is continuing till today, and the reservation policy now encompasses not just scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, but the OBCs or the other backward castes too. The point is it the policy which needs to be sustained? Is it something which is beneficial for those for which it aimed at. These, in fact, created a kinds of debates. On the one hand, it has been found that the policy of reservation has been able to penetrate into the urban sector, but so far as the vast rural population is concerned, it is really doubtful to what extent this policy of reservation has really been able to achieve what it aimed at. Again, on the other hand, it has been argued that the policy of reservation, instead of creating an egalitarian society, is creating a creamy layer within even the scheduled caste population. So is it time has come to review this policy, to what extent or how far it requires some kinds of rectifications or modifications? These are the issues that need to be addressed urgently. On the other hand, it has been argued that the policy of reservation has been able to bring people from the totally downtrodden, totally neglected castes and families into the fore. It has been able to give a kind of education, a kind of public employment, and thereby to give a kind of social prestige and status which these people would never been able to achieve if the policy of reservation does not exist. Finally, coming to the issue of the kinds of politics that caste is playing in this time, or particularly during the 21st century. Some people are questioning that whether caste, which is a traditional category, is competent or consistent even in 20th century India, which is trying to be modernized in every aspect of life. Sociologists are of the opinion that traditional caste category no longer exists. In fact, noted sociologist M.N. Srinivas, even during his study of castes in early 20th century, pointed out that the ritualistic immobility of caste did not exist even during that time. He, in fact, coined a very famous term which has become very popular nowadays, that is the policy of Sanskritization, where the so-called lower castes tried to emulate certain features of the upper castes in order to be at a status at par with those castes. So, caste as a traditional, ritualistic, immobile social category began to lose those features even from the early 20th century. So naturally, those features no longer exist to that extent during the 21st century. But caste as a dynamic category in politics exists. It is a very powerful category which in fact is shaping Indian politics, and at the same time it is getting modified, it gets transformed, and it changes its major features from time to time. Myron Weiner, a noted social and political scientist, once remarked that it was not the objective of the Constituent Assembly, neither is it feasible for the Indian state to totally erase or annihilate caste as a category. Caste, like religion, is a part of the daily existence of every Indian individual. So we cannot just wish to be annihilated or wish to have a system where caste simply does not exist. On the contrary, we should use caste, or it is in fact the objective, or it should be the objective of the Indian state to use caste as a category for social change. Caste should be instrumental in bringing about social change in India. The rise of the middle castes, the assertive politics of the backward castes, the kinds of education and the public employment that the scheduled castes have been able to extract and thereby to gain the social ascendancy, these are required to break down the ascendancy or the once monopolistic ascendancy of the upper castes, which the Indian state or the Indian civilization has noticed for several centuries. So it remains a very dynamic and a very challenging field of study, and in fact, with the rise of so many caste organizations, caste associations, caste-based political parties in the Indian political scenario, we could definitely expect that caste in the coming days will be giving a new kind of fillip to the Indian politics, a new kind of thrust to the Indian politics, and thereby a new kind of Indian nation state would evolve, which will definitely establish a kind of equality and justice, may not be like the kind of justice and equality that the Western states and the Western civilization have noticed, but a new kind of indigenous justice and equality would be able, in the Indian state, would be able to usher in through the dynamics and the interplay of these various categories and politics, and particularly the caste.